For those who have just logged on, we're trying to get a bunch of props like bolsters, straps, folded up blankets, cushions, whatever you can use to prop your body up when you're in a lying down position. And if you're feeling chilled in any way, or maybe you want a sweater close by or something so that when you're holding a while, you can make sure that you're nice and warm for temperature. I'm just going to adjust this a little bit. So the other thing to be braced for your longer holds, won't surprise any of you, if we're hanging out, not being as active, not moving as frequently, something happens for our minds. And sometimes that is some mind action, right? The mind can get thinking about things, planning things, remembering things, dwelling on things. And so just a reminder to take a moment now and set an intention for where you'd like your mind to be when we're doing these long holds. Here's your choices as a little refresher. Choice number one, totally fine if you want your mind to just run. Maybe you've had a really busy morning or a busy weekend, and you feel the need just to let the thoughts do what they need to do, to run their course, to move through you, find their way out. That's a fine choice to make. So at any point, you can say, yep, I'm just going to let the mind do what it needs to do. Choice number two is being a little bit more mindful, a little bit more intentional about controlling the mind by using techniques like focusing on breathing. And I'll offer that up lots of reminders through this class, is to bring your attention to your breath. And in fact, when we're holding poses for a longer time, we have an opportunity to really start to lengthen the breath, to deepen the breath, and to use it as a bit of a release for any tension that's built up. So that's always an option. We're aiming, often in a yin class, we're aiming for stillness. Stillness in the body once you get into the supported pose, and stillness in the mind. And so that's an option as well. You could, just like anyone who's tried out meditation, you might focus on breath, you might focus on nothing. You might just focus on being empty and still in these longer holds. Okay, so 3 choices. Let the mind go, focus on breathing, or attempt emptiness, total stillness. We'll give those, I'll remind you as we go along. So we're going to actually start by lying on the floor and making sure that the props are available for things, especially like we're going to start by lying on the floor with one knee in and one leg out, but don't do it yet, because think about when you do a knee drop in a few minutes, where do you want the bolster or the pillow or the folded up blanket to be? You're going to want it on either side of you so that your knees can drop onto one side, and then the other pillow or other folded up blanket is available on the other side for the knees to drop onto. So take a moment and just get your props really close at hand. And once that's true, I invite you to start today's practice just by lying down on your back. And take a couple of breaths. And just like we do when we normally begin the class seated, I invite you to check in. So what are you feeling today in your body? It's kind of like a mini body scan. So maybe you start at the top of your head. Just do a mini body scan, thinking about your head, your neck, your shoulders, down your back, and so on. What do you notice just now about how your body is feeling? You can breathe as you check in with yourself. Now that you've checked in, let's see if we can bring stillness to the position that you've chosen. So I've got my knees up because I find that's nice and supportive for my back. You might have your legs stretched out or some other way. You could even tuck a bolster underneath the back of your knees. So find a position that you can just hold for 1 minute and see if you can hold still. So this practices stillness control is things like, I've got an itch, but I'm going to ignore it. I feel like moving my toes and stretching them out, but I'm not going to for 1 minute. I'm just going to hold them still. So stillness is hard. It's a real challenge because we fidget all the time. I do anyway. And so this is an opportunity to practice true stillness, and it's using the mind to override the impulse to move. And it gets better with practice. It's an easier thing once you've tried it out a few times. So find stillness, find your breath, and let's focus on just on breathing for the next few moments. If you're aware of discomfort at any point in today's class, I would ask that you be really aware of whether the discomfort is going to cause damage. And I know that's sometimes hard to know, but is it the kind of discomfort that's just discomfort? It just doesn't feel great, but you can handle it for a minute. Or is it, oh yeah, if I hold this any longer, my body is going to be in difficulty later on. If that's the case, of course, come out of stillness, move to a better position at any point. But if it's just discomfort, if it's just, oh, I can feel an ache here, or something a little bit off there, then I invite you to focus on that spot. Bring your attention to that area and just breathe into it. Good. So we'll transition ourselves now into some poses, starting with one knee in towards your chest. You can choose whether you interlace your fingers between the hamstring and the calf to hold the knee in, or if you'd rather have your arms on the ground, both are fine. Move this so you can see. The other leg is going to come off the ground and hover. Now this one is a strength-based pose more than a supported pose. And the reason that we're beginning with it is to build a little bit of heat in the body, because we do want ourselves to be warmed up to be able to get into some of those slower, longer holds. We'll get more out of the relaxing of all of the tissues, connective tissues, if our bodies are nice and warm. So we've got one knee in, we've got the other leg outstretched off the ground, hovering off the ground, about an inch or so. And we're breathing as we hold. We know that our core is engaged in building some heat for us here. Focus on your breath. It's also okay to just notice, what's changing as you hold this longer. What do you become aware of in your body that you weren't aware of when we began the pose? Two more breaths here. And change sides. Bring the leg that was stretched out is now brought in towards your chest. You can choose to interlace your fingers or leave the hands on the ground. The leg that was in is now the outstretched leg, hovering an inch or so off the ground. And we're beginning to focus on breathing. Building a bit of heat by using our core, strengthening through our abdominals. Again, if you're experiencing any discomfort, see if you can assess. Is it the kind of discomfort that's scary and going to cause trouble later? In which case, change something. Make this better for yourself. Or is it just discomfort and you can breathe through it? Let's do two more breaths here. And then bring both your knees into your chest for a little stretch. We enjoy a gentle rocking back and forth. We're doing everything a little more slowly today, so all of our movements are a little slower, a little more controlled, a little more intentional. Good. My favorite pose for my body, my particular back, is to cross one ankle onto the thigh of the other leg. And then to choose two positions with the arms, either you can be in cactus shape with your elbows extended out from shoulder height, your hands at right angles, or you can use your fingers to grab on around the hamstring and lift your foot off the floor and pull those legs in. And we usually hold this for 3 breaths. Today we're holding it for a minute. And if you like, you could close your eyes if that helps you to be a little more inward focused. Few more breaths here. And slowly let go of this side. Mindfully, just notice as you're moving to the other side. Move slowly enough that you're paying attention to each of your movements. And as we get into the other side, and as we get into all the poses today, because we're holding poses longer, we don't have to go straight to our edge. So you don't have to go to the hardest version of this. You don't have to pull as forcefully as possible as you start. You might start it in a more gentle place, a little easier spot, but then we're here long enough that you might notice that, oh yeah, you're ready for a little more intensity. As we hold it, you might want to pull the legs a little closer to your torso, or not. You might just want stillness from where you started. Breathing here. Check in with your mind. Remember the intention that you wanted for today. Do you want to let the mind run? Do you want to focus on breath? Or are you attempting stillness? Let's do that for the next 2 breaths. And again, we'll get out of the pose slowly. So be mindful as you move your limbs out. Getting ready for a knee drop. So this is where we wanted to have the bolsters or folded blankets close by so that when we tip our knees towards the floor, if it's comfortable to lay right on the floor and you find that's supportive for your body and you get a good stretch that's not too painful, feels supported, great. Then move your knees right onto the floor. If though that feels like if you held it for 2 minutes, it would be a strain, then instead get that bolster tucked kind of under your thigh. So fairly close to where your hip is where we want to have that support. Give that a try and see if it feels supportive. Can you really let go into that, or do you need to make an adjustment? While you're settling in there, I'm just going to grab my timer. So this one we're going to hold for 2 minutes, which gives lots of time for you to either let the mind run or have stillness or focus on breath. So we're in that gentle knee drop, supported knee drop. For me, there's lots to focus on in the body. The longer that I hold, I really notice changes in where I feel, what I feel. So I find that a helpful focus as I breathe.
Notice if you have a tendency to want to move any parts of you. So do the fingers want to fidget? Does the head seem to want to move? Toes. And again, it's always a choice. You don't have to still those parts of you, but it's an option if you want to practice being still, to notice when you have the tendency to move or fidget and see if you can bring stillness to those parts. Two more breaths here. And mindfully start to engage your core. Bring your knees back up to center. When we began this pose, we had the knees into the chest, arms extended long along the floor, shoulders low. It's two options though. You can have the knees extended and then flop the knees over to the other side. Or if you want a little less intensity, you can start with your feet on the floor and then flop your knees to the side we haven't yet done. Both are fine. Reposition the bolster, pillow, blanket, whatever you've got there underneath your thigh or under your knees, close to your hip. And then see if it feels right to find stillness as you start to focus on your breathing. Maybe allowing the breath to get a little longer as you breathe out, and a little deeper as you breathe in. Notice where your mind is just now. Be intentional about where you'd like the mind to be. Allow it to go, or focus on breath, or find stillness. And two more breaths here. Be mindful as you engage your core. Use that strong core to bring the knees back to center and give them a little hug and maybe a little rock back and forth slowly. And then we'll be reaching for the strap to do the long leg holds with strap. So begin by placing the strap around one leg or your housecoat tie or whatever it is you found. Maybe a long towel is able to drape where you hold each end. And we'll begin as we usually do by pressing a flexed foot towards the ceiling. And let's just work out some of the kinks here first by doing a little pointing, a little flexing. Let's get a little bit of movement here into the foot before we hold. Maybe you can want to do an ankle circle here. You've got a choice with your other leg. So you've got one leg in the strap reaching for the sky. The other leg can either be bent knee, foot on the floor, or can be straight other leg resting down long on the floor. And you'll feel something different in your hip, or I do anyway, depending on which of those you choose. So pick what feels like it'll work best for you. And now let's get into our 1 minute long hold, finding where is the right place for you. So we usually are looking for where the leg can be straight without shaking. So for you, that might be more of a foot reaching towards the opposite corner of the room. Or maybe you're really, really flexible and your leg needs to come more toes over your nose. Find where's the right position for you to hold for 1 minute as we breathe. And we'll shift now to open the leg up. So I've got the strap on my right leg, so I'm opening my right leg up towards the right. If your strap is on your left leg, you're opening your left leg towards the left. You can choose to hold the strap with one hand, with both hands. That part doesn't matter so much. But we are aiming our shoulder blades towards the floor to the extent that it's possible here. I've got my right elbow anchored on the ground. That helps me to hold, have the arm be the post that the strap is anchored around. Find what works best for you. And again, decide, is your leg further away from your nose? Are your toes closer to your nose? Where's your right spot? And now let's start our minute. Breathe and hold. Be intentional about what your mind is focused on. And we're contracting the core to help us move the leg back to center. I like to switch hands with the strap and then hold with the opposite arm as I bring the leg across the body. And I like to move the other leg out of the way when I'm doing this one. Maybe you've chosen to have that other leg on the ground the whole time, so that's not relevant for you. Again, take a moment to find where's the best placement of your foot in relation to your body on this opposite side now. Check into where your shoulders are, and is there any way to get them a little closer to the ground? A little more shoulder blades anchoring you to the floor, to the earth. And now let's start our minute. breathing and being intentional about your focus. Contract your core, bring that leg back up to center, and we're changing sides. So if you are using a strap, perhaps it's easy to simply put the other foot into the same strap or readjust whatever way you need to. And I should have said, if you don't have access to a strap, remember that you can just use your own hands to cause the resistance here by interlacing your fingers around the hamstring. So that's an alternative to the strap. Find your right spot. How far do you want the toes away from your nose? Let's do a little pointing and flexing of this side. Maybe a couple of ankle circles, a little blood flow into those tendons and ligaments in the feet. And let's begin. Holding and breathing. Breathing out as long as we need to exhale all the air. And that might naturally allow the breath in to be a bit deeper. Shift now to open up that leg to the side. So I've now got my left leg on the left side. I usually run into the wall as I'm doing this side, but that's not a bad thing in this pose because the wall is offering up the support, allowing me to more fully just let go into this hold. So if you're bumping into furniture, you might be able to use it the same way. And let's hold and breathe. Little core contraction as you slowly move your leg over to the other side, perhaps moving the leg that's not in the strap out of the way, finding the spot that's right for you. Also have the option, if you've got your folded blanket or bolster, if it's high enough, you could tuck it underneath this leg to really let the leg go. My bolster isn't high enough to allow for that, so the strap is a better option for me. Find a bit of stillness and find your breath. And again, a little core contraction, helping you to bring that leg back up, remove the strap. If it feels good, again, you could hug the knees into your chest and rock side to side slowly. A little reset in the body. Excellent. Then place your feet hip width apart down on the floor, feet hip width, knees hip width. So take a moment to just notice the quality of those long holds. Means that for me anyway, I can feel that my body's calming down a little, even though sometimes the holds are hard in the body or feel like they're causing a bit of muscle releasing. My body starts to calm down. Maybe that's true for you, maybe it's not. But we're going to attempt to bring the same ease, that same slow, calm energy to a bridge pose. Now, bridge takes some strength. So it is different than just a supported pose. We're going to see if we can apply all that same calmness, same ease to an easy bridge. Contract the core, spread your toes wide, press your big toes into the mat. Lift just your tailbone up, so a tiny little lift of the tailbone. And then don't use too much strength. Just see how is it to lift the next vertebra and the next without using force, more just allowing the lift to happen. In the back of the neck nice and long. Continuing to lift one vertebra at a time, slowly off the floor. To whatever height feels right for you. Again, no force in it. Just find where is the place for you today. And we're going to hold here, not for a whole minute, but for about 30 seconds. And again, just paying attention. What do you feel in your body as you hold this? Does it stay the same or does it shift? Can you breathe while you're here? And we'll use that same ease and calmness to slowly come down. So place the next vertebra down on the mat. And then one after the other, slowly. until your full spine is back on the ground. I invite you to lengthen both your legs, stretch your feet away from you, bring your arms overhead and stretch your arms and hands away from you. Be your longest self for a big stretch here. Beautiful. Be mindful as you turn yourself over. We're heading to our hands and knees, but move slowly, mindfully. Notice the movements that you make as you turn over and push yourself up and find your way to hands and knees. Good. So we're starting our cat-cow here. We're not going to hold in one position, so this one's a little bit more flow, but we're moving really mindfully. So moving into that rounded spine shape and holding for a few moments. And then being mindful as we move into the arched back shape, holding for a few moments. And then just find your own rhythm with it. But keeping those same qualities of really paying attention to what you notice in your body and paying attention to breathing. Let's do 2 more cycles, 2 more of each direction. Beautiful. And then let's bring it into child's pose. You have choices here again. So maybe you know that your body goes pretty naturally into child's pose and you'd be able to hold it for 2 full minutes. Or maybe you know that your body needs a little extra support. Easy way to do that is to put your pillow, blanket, or bolster in between your heels and your hips. Just gives a little cushioning between your hips and heels. Also can put a block, bolster, or blanket underneath your head. This soft pillow doesn't work as well. So that your head doesn't have to go quite as far to get down to the ground. So we're trying to be totally supported in this child's pose. Figure out what that is for you. Take a moment to adjust. And then we'll begin our 2-minute hold. Allowing your body to feel the support of these props to start to settle in and release into them. So instead of holding our own selves up in position, we're letting gravity help us to just let go. Settle into being held by what's underneath you. And breathe deeply. Notice if there's any parts that want to be fidgety. And just choose. Let them fidget or bring stillness. One more breath here. Contract your core. Be mindful as you slowly bring yourself out of child's pose and back to hands and knees. Move your props out of the way. Curl your toes. We're going to head towards downward dog. So reminder that if you don't want to do a down dog today, fantastic option is lengthening one leg out, anchoring your toes to the floor, pressing the heel way away from you. Gives you all the same qualities of downward dog. So choose that one-legged, one knee on the floor version, or curl all your toes and lift your hips up. And let's spread the fingers wide and really push those hips as far back as you can get them. We'll take a moment to stretch each leg. So a little bicycle just for the first couple of moments, pressing one heel at a time towards the floor. But then after we've done a little bit of that to bring blood flow, then we're going to find a pose we can hold still for our 1 minute. We want a lot of pushing action, so pushing the hands into the mat to push the hips as far back as they'll go. I can't do that with straight knees. If I straighten my knees, my back rounds a little bit. And so for me, I'm better off to keep my knees a little bent and get that length from fingertips all the way to hips. No roundedness in my back. I'm bending my knees to help. Pressing my heels a little bit towards the floor, but my heels won't reach when I'm in this version of down dog. Find stillness in whatever version you've got, and now we'll hold for a minute of breathing. Continuing to have the strength to push the hips far away from you and a little bit higher towards the sky. Breathing deeply, helping us to hold this one. And then I invite you to head towards pigeon pose. If you wish, we can lift the right leg high and then bring the right knee in between the two hands for the more traditional pigeon, where we've got the heel lined up at the hip crease, opposite hip crease, coming up onto our fingertips. If this is not going to work for you today, remember that you can do that very same shape lying on your back. But still, knee up, heel around the hip crease of the opposite leg. If you're doing the laying on the floor version, you're just trying to move the knee across the body a little bit to encourage the stretch in the hip. And those who've chosen the full version of the pose, the upright version, I invite you to bring your head down. Again, you might want it on a bolster so that you can really let go into this one today. So we're going to hold this pigeon for 2 minutes. Head comfortable, body supported. Or maybe it's too much in the hips for you and you need to put a bolster in between your hips to bring the floor a little closer to your hips. That's all good too. Or do the laying on your back version. Once you've found your spot, let's hold still and breathe. And one more breath there. Again, a little core contraction to support you to slowly move out of this pose. Back to hands and knees. We're going to be doing the other side. So if you are currently lying on your back, don't move to your hands and knees. You'll just be changing sides in a moment. If you're doing this version, then slowly to hands and knees so that we can slowly downward dog. We won't hold this down dog. Oh, maybe we will. I just realized those who did downward dog with one leg down probably held it all on one side. So let's hold another downward dog. Fingers spread. Pushing those hips far back and a little higher. Pressing both your heels towards the floor. My knees are bent so that my back can be nice and straight. But maybe you have achieved a different level of flexibility, different body. Maybe your heels go right down to the floor even while your back stays straight. Just watching for any roundness in the spine, trying to push that out for this pose. Your head should be dangling. No tension in the neck. Jaw released. Two more breaths here. And let's lift the left leg up. Getting ready for our pigeon. Bring the left leg through. Finding your way into whatever version of pigeon works for you on this side. Settle into it. It might be the same or different from your initial side. Maybe this side needs different props in different places. So take a moment to notice that. Settle yourself in. And then find stillness and breath. Notice where your mind is for this moment. Just be intentional about where the mind might be, where you choose it to be. And one more breath. And slowly back to hands and knees. Good. Come to a seated position. We're going to keep one leg into the body. So we're seated with the heel close to the groin and the other leg outstretched. And again, because we've got props today, maybe you check in with that outstretched leg. We're about to do a head to knee position, head of the knee pose, to stretch our hamstrings a little further. But maybe you need to put your socks underneath your heel to give it a little cushion, or maybe a little something underneath your knee, small folded blanket for a little more support. So take a moment to place anything you'd like. You can also choose to have the leg more off to the side or more in front of you, depending on what your body likes. We're going to sit nice and tall here. So we're lengthening our spine in this seated position. That takes a little bit of effort, takes a little bit of core. You're trying to let the shoulders not do the work of lengthening the spine. So can you feel supported from your midsection to really lift tall? And we're going to turn the body to face the outstretched leg. And for 1 minute, we're starting to move our torso towards our thigh. So we're bending at the hip crease, walking the hands down the leg, aiming our chest towards our knee. But for this first one, we're keeping the spine straight. So it's not a rounded spine. It's not head towards the knee in a rounded shape. It's bending at the hip crease, chest with straight spine, a little bit towards the thigh. And let's breathe. What do you notice in your body? Two more breaths. And then before we come out of it, I invite you to do that rounded shape for a moment. So for this moment, we're rounding the back. We're aiming our top of our head, crown of our head towards the knee. Holding there just for 2 breaths. And lifting the head back to be in line with spine and walking the hands up the leg. Whew, good. Let's take our fists, plant them behind our hips, hopefully on the mat, so you've got a little bit of cushion. And then use your strong arms
to lift your hips off the ground and give them a little shake in this position. And then we'll change sides. Bring the outstretched leg in. Send the leg that was in to be outstretched. Comfortable, whatever you need to do on that side. And let's do the same thing. Let's sit tall. Use your core to help. Bring length to the spine and then adjust it. Turn your body to face your outstretched leg. It's up to you if the leg is way outstretched or a little more in front of the body. And just like the other leg, we're folding at the hip crease, aiming our chest and our straight back towards the thigh, walking the hands down the leg, breathing here, noticing if this side feels any different than the first side that you did. Seeing if you can settle into it. So you're not necessarily finding your edge. You're not going to the hardest point first. We're gradually allowing the body to warm to the pose. Few more breaths. And then allowing roundedness in the spine, bringing the head towards the knee for 2 breaths. Bring the head in line with spine, walk the hands back up the leg, take fists, plant them onto the mat behind your hips, lift your hips up and give them a little shake. Excellent. Good. Shake your legs out in front of you, doing a lot with our legs and our hips. Similar pose for a rounded back, a bit of a forward release. We're going to bring our knees to a bent position while we're sitting. Grab onto your block bolster, folded blankets, and you are going to have to decide, depending on the flexibility of your back. You might have your bolster, you might need a big stack of blankets, or your bolster in the topmost position. Because what we're about to do is tuck our head onto it. Now, if you're feeling like there's a lot of tightness in your back, you'll want this in the highest position, bringing the floor really up high to meet your head. If you've got a little more flexibility, then maybe you can have sort of a middle ground, bringing the head down to meet your stack of blankets or your bolster this way. So legs are bent at the knee, just out on either side of you comfortably. You're just allowing them to fall open. Or maybe this is tough in your hips and you actually would like to have your bolsters under your knees, supported there. So that's another option. And then we're going for a forward bend as we're seated here. So hands could just rest in front. We're starting to round the spine, tipping the head forward. If the head can rest on your stack of blankets or bolster, that's the best, because then you're more supported. But if not, it's okay to just fold forward and hold here for a couple of breaths. 2 more breaths. Head comes in line with the spine. Walk your hands back up the legs, bringing your spine to full height. Again, let's take our fists, pump them behind our hips, stretch our legs out this time, and just a little lift. Looking the strong arms, lift your hips off the ground, give them a little shake. Good, and we haven't had water today. Oh my goodness, grab your water. I drank a lot before class, so I have had water today, but I'm ready for some now. Well done. We're coming towards the end. Got a couple more juicy ones. So I'd like the bolsters now to be placed on either side so that we can do a lying down version of butterfly. So butterfly is the one where we get the knees opened, we get a bit of a stretch in the inner thighs. We're going to do a lying down version of that. So come to lying, but have your bolsters ready. So just like when we started the class and we moved both our knees onto one bolster, or we're supported by a bolster, this time it's just one knee gets one bolster, the other knee gets the other bolster, so that we can flop those knees open with our feet together. So plant your feet together, heels or edge of the feet stay down on the mat. See that with my bolsters in the way. And then because it's hard, usually we have a bit of tightness in our inner thighs and it's hard to open our knees. If you're really flexible, you might not need the bolsters at all. And you can just open up those knees where they are. Most of us need a little extra support. So laying those bolsters, planting the bolsters, pillows, blankets under the top of the thighs towards the hips just allows you to have that support to open up. See how that is for you. Lengthen your spine. Bring your shoulder blades down your back. And let's find stillness and breathe. So you're able to deepen your breathing. Good. To come out of this pose, use your hands on the outside of your thighs to push your knees together. So instead of gripping at the thighs, the hands have helped out so that your knees are now hip width. Your feet also hip width. And have your strap at the ready. You may or may not need it, but if it's close, it's good one to have. You're going to try a happy baby pose, which brings one foot into our hands, knee coming towards, aiming towards the armpit. Now, this is, I find this challenging. Anyone with tight hamstrings is going to really feel this. So if this feels like, whew, I'm not even sure I can grab my foot, that's where the strap would be handy. Place it around the foot just like we did earlier. But instead of trying to straighten the knee, we're very much trying to bend this knee,
quite far in, like really bend the knee towards the armpit. So it's right knee towards right armpit. The other leg can choose to be knee bent, feet on the floor, foot on the floor, or leg outstretched if you want more opening through your inner thighs. Okay, so either the strap is helping to get that knee aimed toward the armpit, or you're able to use your hand to hold the outside of the foot, aiming knee towards armpit. Lengthen the spine, keep the length through the back of the neck, and breathe into this one. This, for me, is much more intense. Few more breaths. And come on out, bend the knee and release that leg to the ground. Maybe shake the legs a little bit, wiggle the hips a little, and bring the other leg in. So same choices. You can use the strap around the foot to bring now the left knee aiming towards the left armpit, or maybe your left hand is able to reach and hold the outside of the foot. The other leg can have knee bent, foot on the floor, or leg outstretched. We're trying to keep the foot parallel with the ceiling. And if this is not enough intensity for you, you can play around with bringing, again, the toes a little more above the nose. So shifting the position of where the toes are, more above the nose or more above the hip, will change the intensity here. Let's breathe. Remember that we're helping the connective tissues, the tendons, the fascia, the ligaments. Few more breaths. And bring that heel close to the floor and lengthening the legs. Shake them out. Whew. My legs shake in that one. If that's true for you, that's normal for me. Finally, we have reached Shavasana, which of course has those same qualities of breath and stillness. The invitation today is to lay on your bolster or blanket in a way that opens up the chest. So let me demonstrate that. It's optional. If you just want to have your regular Shavasana, great. If you love doing legs up the wall and you know how to do it, this is a good time for that. Or if you want to try this, we're trying to have the bolster or like a long, narrow blanket, kind of, bolster shaped, as the length of your spine. So it takes a little bit of positioning. The idea is to have your head hanging off it a little bit. And if your spine is around the same length as mine, then your tailbone hangs off the bottom end. So the bolster is supporting most of the spine, but there's this opening that happens across the chest because your shoulders are draped on either side of the bolster. So if you're using folded blankets, the option here is to have them folded in such a way that your shoulders can drape off the edges of them, your head can drape off the top, and your tailbone can drape off the bottom. If any of that doesn't feel right today, just go to regular Shavasana. Totally fine. So take a moment just to figure that out. Fold your blankets. See if this is going to work for you. And then we're going to hold just for 2 minutes. It's a shorter Shavasana, same as what we've kind of been doing all the time. Yet I really invite you now to try stillness. Can you hold a still body, no fidgeting, and a still mind? Focus on nothing for 2 minutes, knowing that anytime the mind wanders, that's okay. Just then bringing it back to be still. Starting now. And now take your 3 deeper breaths and go ahead and bring movement back. Maybe do some circles with your wrists. Stretch your legs. If you've had enough of wherever you've placed bolsters and blankets, you can roll off them. We are rolling onto our sides so that we can come up to sitting to close the class together. Slowly, mindfully, find your way to any seated position that will work for you to close. Find your sit bones anchoring you. I'm propped up on my bolster, so my sit bones are on my bolster. Feel the spine tall, all the way up through the crown of the head. Shoulders easy, neck gentle.
And let's take the thumb of one hand into the palm of the other. Inhale and raise the arms up. 2 easy breaths here. If you like, in through the nose and out through the mouth. Hands together, 2 breaths. Hands up and then either behind or in front of the neck. Full extension, breathing in. And slow, hands to heart, breathing out. Keep your hands, your thumbs anchored at your heart. And congratulate yourself on this last breath. Namaste.